All right, welcome everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. And you are on our webinar today, which is Fear Not Citizen Development. And we have a lineup of some interesting speakers for you today, and hope that you'll find this webinar to be really insightful and informative. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and get rolling here. Of course, we have to have our usual safe harbor slide about forward-looking statements. If there are any statements made during this webinar, they are not guarantees of future functionalities or capabilities in the platform. And this is our agenda where we'll be going today. So we'll introduce all of our speakers. We'll go over an understanding of citizen development. We'll talk about supporting citizen developers and creating that community of collaboration at your organization. We'll review some leading practices as you pilot and scale your citizen development program. And then we'll discuss a use case of one of our customers who had created an excellent citizen development program at their organization. And of course, we always have time for questions at the end, and we'll provide you with some additional resources. So you can feel free to take notes during the presentation, but we will provide a copy of the presentation to all of the attendees, and it will include the resources that we refer to during the presentation here. Okay, so let's get started with some introductions here. My name's Brita Koch. I am a senior marketing manager in the community, and my role here at ServiceNow has been varied in the almost 15 years I've been here. So I spent about 10 years out in the field as an engagement manager in deploying projects with our customers. So don't let the marketing in my title scare you away. I've actually been out there and felt some of your pain out there. Paige, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself and let us know what you're all about?
Yep. So hi, everyone. I am Paige Duffy. I'm a product success manager here at ServiceNow, specifically in the creator workflow space, which is your app building, your citizen dev programs. Mostly I speak to customers about those things. And a lot of these practices that we talk about today are things that we've gotten out of those conversations with customers. So they're truly leading practices that are in practice. But prior to joining ServiceNow about 2 years ago, I was actually a customer for years and years. So I've been around the ServiceNow ecosystem for about 12 years now. So I've not only talked to customers about doing this, but I've actually done it myself. So hopefully I can provide some insight into, the pains and best practices that I've learned and gleaned over the years.
And I'm sure you will. And our other speaker is Vance Morgan. Do you want to take a moment to introduce yourself, Vance?
Absolutely. Morning, everyone. My name is Vance Morgan. I am in Pensacola, Florida. I am a principal portfolio manager in our creator workflow space, similar to Paige on the leading practices team. So I'm responsible for documenting all the leading practices that Paige and her peers discover out in the field, implementation insights, and any sort of documentation to really drive product adoption. I've been on this team for about 2.5 years. Before this, I was with EY as a partner doing ServiceNow implementations for 2.5 years. Prior to that, I was a customer at Cox Automotive on the platform team. And then before that, I was a fulfiller, actually closing requests and incidents on the ServiceNow platform. So kind of come full circle and seen it from a number of different vantage points.
Yeah, what a great background to bring into this. And I know Cox Automotive also has some great success stories.
Yeah, they had it going on for sure.
So to try to keep this a little bit interactive, we have a couple of polls sprinkled throughout the presentation today. So our first poll is, do you have a citizen developer program? Maybe you don't and you have no plans. Maybe you don't and you do have plans. Yes, but you're looking to come here and figure out some ways that you can improve that. Or yes, you have it and it's going pretty well and you're just looking for some extra tips and tricks. So right now it looks like the majority of folks are looking to set one up, which is exactly the audience that we were hoping to get here to get you all excited about this and give you the tools and best practices that you need to do this properly the first time. And let's see, we're coming along here. We'll let the poll go for a few more moments. But it looks like far and away, most everybody's number 2, no, but looking to set one up. All right. So let's go ahead and close out the poll then. and we'll move into our presentation. So one of the things that, I think we first need to determine is, how do you define citizen development? So why don't you go ahead and drop in the chat what your definition of citizen development is, and we can talk about some of those responses as they're coming in.
I'm really curious to see what everyone defines citizen development as.
Yeah.
As we get through the slide, you'll see that what we have found is that it seems to be different everywhere. Every company has a slightly different definition, and maybe you don't call it citizen development. You may call it delegated development or distributed development. But basically, anything outside of the ServiceNow centralized core dev team.
Well, let's take a look at
And
the
some good
chat
answers
here.
now.
Yep.
See what we have coming in here. Doesn't look like we have anybody putting in a definition of. All right, here's distributed development capability for simple configuration to take the pressure off the core platform team, business users maintaining their own business area processes, app dev build delegated to non-traditional developers, or create their own workflows, people with training and skill sets who can build solutions, clients take on managing their own development work, enabling people who are not formally trained. Yeah, so, I mean, pretty similar definitions, but a little slightly different. So thanks everybody for participating in that. And as you can see, there's, potentially as many definitions as there are people on the webinar, which is why I'm going to turn it over to Paige, and she's going to walk us through understanding citizen development.
All righty. So, as we've kind of already found out, there is a base citizen or distributed development definition that everyone kind of seems to gravitate towards, which is someone not on the centralized dev team doing development work. But we're going to dive a little bit more into kind of what we call dimensions. So we've taken those ideas, those concepts, and we've broken them into dimensions to try and create different buckets of developers. So as you can see here, we've got 4 dimensions. We start with the organization, where they sit. So are they in IT, or are they in the line of business, or in a department outside of IT? Next, we're looking at their focus and their experience. What kind of things do they do on a daily basis? If they're in IT, are they actually a developer, just not a ServiceNow developer? If they're out in a department, are they a business analyst or a process owner? And then next, we look at their training and certification. So what kind of training do they have, formal or otherwise? What kind of certifications do they have? Do they have their CSA, their CAD, or do they just have some basic training? And then lastly, we really look at platform access. So how trusted are they? All of these dimensions kind of lead into the last one, but how much permission do we give them within the platform? Do we give them broad permissions, or is it very highly controlled? So as you can see in this image, we kind of have, we had our pro devs on the right, on the left, and our true citizen developers on the right. But we take all of those dimensions and we break those down into kind of 3 categories. These may vary a little bit, and you'll even see in a future slide how we talk about kind of an area between 2 categories. So if you want to go to the next slide, we'll look at those categories. So first we have our core developers. You probably all already know what that is. Those are your true ServiceNow developers. They have all the access to the platform. They are certified. They know what they're doing. Then you have what we're calling our line of business developers. These are typically outside of IT. They work in a line of business or a department. They're skilled technologists. They may have certifications, and they kind of have a level of access to the platform that's somewhere in the middle. So maybe they have higher level of access in a subprod or a single subprod instance, and they don't have it in other instances, or they have access to like Studio versus App Engine Studio. And then lastly, we have our citizen developers. So these are your business analysts. They probably have some ServiceNow training, but it's probably pretty specific to how to build apps in something like AES, and they have very controlled access. And you'll see that what we find as kind of the sweet spot for where ServiceNow is today is pretty much everything on the left your line of business developers, and then kind of getting into your high-level citizen developers. So something that lives between those two categories. We're not really to the point yet where we could say that our platform is truly enabled for true citizen developers, but we are hoping that we will get there in future releases. At this point, targeting Xanadu, which I don't know if we did a safe harbor, but safe harbor, there are some cool things coming in Washington Store 2 and Xanadu for citizen developers. So yeah, hopefully that gets us further towards the left on that. So now that we've kind of talked about the types of developers, we really need to talk about the types of development that can be distributed. So what you'll see here is a list of different types of development over the years that we've been asked about. How do we distribute the creation of knowledge articles? Some of these items aren't really development. They're typically something that you give permissions to do in production. They're not really considered development. You're not making code changes or flow changes and promoting them up your pipeline. And obviously, this is not an exhaustive list by any means, but we're really focused on maximizing value from where that line's at. So service catalog and custom applications. Those are the tools that ServiceNow has to best position your citizen developers and enable them.
And now we're going to take time for a little bit of a poll here, give Paige a break. What do you think your biggest hurdle will be to getting a citizen developer program going at your organization? Would it be getting management support, finding the right people, determining what to have the citizen developers work on, or creating your governance for the citizen development program? So it looks like governance and who to be citizen developers are kind of our top categories here.
I was going to say, I would predict governance is probably going to win this.
I thought maybe getting management support would be the more difficult one, because sometimes I feel like managers are like really afraid of citizen development.
I will be very openly honest with you. It's not generally managers that we see the not problem with, but we see the hesitation with. It's actually typically your dev teams, your architects. They're concerned about the platform, which goes back to governance.
Yep. Understandable. And
I was going to say the governance probably ties into obtaining that manager support. So kind of hand in hand.
Yep, there are definitely pieces of governance that require the manager's support as well.
All right. Well, it looks like the responses have slacked off here, so we'll go ahead and close out the poll. But as you said, governance wins the day. So that's not surprising. So we'll move on to our next topic that Paige is also going to talk about, which is how to support citizen developers and how to actually create that community of collaboration. Because as she mentioned, sometimes the developers and admins are the most resistant because it's their platform and they want to make sure nothing goes wrong.
Yeah, and in all fairness, they've probably had things go wrong, and they're typically the ones that have to fix it. So it's understandable. Again, I've been there.
100%.
I was a platform owner. I was a developer. There were always some fears. So the first thing is really keeping in mind that this is a team sport. So on that topic, your citizen developers shouldn't really work in a silo. We have brought out a lot of low-code tools, and they promote and allow you to do faster delivery of applications across all types of developers. So for your pro developers and your core team and your citizen developers. And while that's great, and that opens up more opportunity and allows you to pass off some of your backlog, hopefully, to some of your citizen developers versus your core team. As individuals, it also allows your citizen developers and your pro developers or your core team to work together in collaborative teams. And I feel like that's a really important message and we'll talk through a couple of ways that you can do this, but really enabling your citizen developers to have those open lines of communications with your core team. And kind of what this will look like, if you want to go ahead and click so it brings up the next. Kind of what this looks like is, as an example, maybe your citizen developer builds a basic app. They build the tables, they build the basic flow, but they hit a point where it's too complex for them. So allowing them the ability and the avenue to pass that development work on to your pro or core team for that complex logic, required integrations. You may have to outline what that threshold is, but just allowing that open communication is really, really important to to making the whole thing work. So now we'll get a little bit into training the citizen developers, which I saw a few comments about this. And as we go through this, you'll see that I'm not going to give you concrete, they should do this type of training. And there's a reason for that. And we'll get into it. But the first thing is that the training should be tailored, and you want to make sure that it's consumable. You have to keep in mind that these developers, it's not their full-time job. So sending them off for, a 3-day CAD course, probably not going to work out okay unless they're actually professional developers in IT and that's what they want to do. But your line of business developers, that may not be something that they're able to do. We do have some training out there on Now Learning that's pretty bite-sized and tailored, but it may not work for your specific environment. So you really want to make sure that if you're sending them to do that training, that they're getting training on systems that you use. Next is that you want to make sure that it's company specific. So you're going to have your own policies, your own procedures, your own development pipeline, and they need to know what that is, and it needs to be accessible to them. So they should know what their next steps are. Next, we want the appropriate level of detail. So the right detail at the right time. You don't want to overwhelm them. Again, this is their part-time job, right? And on that same kind of thought process, take out any unneeded jargon. So again, remember, these may not always be developers. So it's important not to necessarily developer speak at them. Next, you may find that it needs to be product specific. And so again, this is why we can't always give you a pre-made training path because you're delegated to distributed developers. Maybe they're not building custom apps. Maybe they're an admin in HRSD. And so in that case, they need HRSD training. Or maybe they are building custom apps and you want them to take the CAD training, or they're using AES and you want them to take the AES training. So it really depends on what they're doing in the system. And then lastly, whatever training material you have or that you provide, make sure that you're giving them the right version. Like Now Learning, as soon as we flip over to general availability for Washington, all of the content will slowly flip over to Washington. You probably aren't on Washington yet, so you may not want to provide them the Washington training. You may want to provide them your version-specific training. And then lastly, Now Learning, you don't have to go back. Now Learning and the developer program, those are two really great places to start. For training, I will tell you that a lot of the developer program training is being moved over to Now Learning, so you may not find it there anymore if you expect it, but those two places are really the place to start for training that we provide. So in addition to enabling your citizen developers with training, we have to empower them as well. So most successful programs, they kind of have one or more of these things in place. They probably have all of these in place in some form or fashion. The first is a community of practice. This is a place for collaboration, and you can use whatever tools you have. This does not have to be a heavy lift. So if your company uses Teams or Slack, you can just create a channel and bring all of your citizen or distributed developers in there and give them a place to communicate. You'll probably find initially that it's a lot of your core team or pro developers answering questions, but as time goes on and your citizen developers get more comfortable, they will also start answering questions. So not only are you giving them a place to ask questions, you're giving them an avenue to help one another. Next is probably my favorite, and that's office hours. So this should typically be like an open forum, a Zoom call, something along those lines. It should be moderated by your pro team or your core team. You'll want to have a cadence for this. Maybe it's once a week, maybe it's a couple times a week, and make sure everyone's aware of it. And it's a really good idea to go ahead and record these and then, index them as a resource after the call so that other people can refer back to them. The reason why this is one of my favorites is because it really helps to manage your core dev team's time. My personal history, we found that once we started a citizen dev program, we were getting pinged a lot on Teams. And if one of us didn't answer, they move on to the next developer. And next thing you know, there's 5 of us all trying to answer the same question, not realizing that all 5 of us were asked the same question. So we started office hours and we started pushing people to go to office hours. You have a question, that's where you go. So it helped free up some of our time and stop, the distractions throughout the day. It helped a lot. Next is a knowledge base. So those indexes that you just created in your office hours, that's where they should go. One of the reasons we really recommend this is because there is a lot of information out on the doc site, and that is a great resource when you're building things, but it may not always be the best resource. It is definitely not curated in any way, shape, or form. They will have access to everything, and that may not be specific to your environment. So it's a good idea to have that. It's also a really good idea to put those company-specific policies and procedures in that knowledge base so they can access it. Some examples of that might be your cloning procedure. So what do they need to do post-clone? Or how do they ask for things to be promoted upwards? What kind of testing requirements do you have? Things of that nature. And then lastly, we have automation. This is not typically the thing people start with, but you want to automate what you can. You want to help remove that complexity from your citizen developers and from your core dev team. So you may consider automating things like testing code moves, code or instance scan, granting citizen developer roles, either post approval. So they put in an application, they want to create an app, go ahead and grant those automatically, which we actually have some plugins to help do that, or perhaps post clone. So you've cloned down, how do you re-grant those roles? Maybe you don't want to put like a clone preserver on those tables. So those are some things that you can look at automating that take the work off of those developers, again, citizen and core developers. All right, and then I am going to go ahead and pass it over to Vance to talk a little bit about leading practices for piloting and scaling your citizen development program.
Yep, thank you, Paige. So yeah, now that Paige gave us a great summary of who citizen developers may be in your organization and what citizen development might look like, we're going to dive into how you can pilot and scale this within your organization. So what we've done is tried to boil down some common themes from customers that have been successful in setting up their setting up their citizen development programs. And there are 3 foundational elements that we've identified. The first is adopting a low-code application platform, just to make sure that your developers are in a protected environment, not only protecting the platform and the data, but protecting them and other developers that are also building. Another thing that we've seen is that our customers embrace the journey. You need to understand this is a multi-year, multi-phase initiative that you're going to have to start small, you're going to have to market your wins, and just know that you just kind of need to look at the long term and be in it for the long run. And tying into that, they market their successes. So the best way to advertise this is to communicate your wins across the company and just really show the value and the accelerated time to production that citizen development brings to the organization. And on top of those foundational elements, we've got some key decisions, and a lot of them y'all already highlighted earlier as concerns. Those are selecting the right use cases and developers, because again, you don't want to open up your platform to just anybody, and not all use cases are right for citizen development. You want to enable and empower the citizen developer. Paige did a great job talking about the community of collaboration, providing them with resources, training, office hours, whatever they need to set them up for success, and actually be successful in building these apps. And then finally, the technical guardrails and the processes that go around that. Governance is at the top of mind of just about every platform owner. There's a ton of risk involved with opening up, allowing low-code developers on your platform. So you want to make sure that everything's in line to protect the platform, but also kind of support innovation from these developers. So next. All right, so when it comes to focusing the program, we want to identify the correct use cases. Now, not all use cases are fit for ServiceNow. Not all use cases are fit for citizen development. Our citizen developers, we've seen a lot of success stories are flow-based workflows, simple task management, request fulfillment through a service catalog, Excel-driven processes or things that maybe live in shared mailboxes where everybody's emailing one particular shared mailbox, managing the work from there, and repeatable processes. These are things that we've seen be converted into custom apps and promoted to production quickly. Like I said, not everything is a good use case for these citizen developers or App Engine Studio. There are some things that you're going to have to rely on your core team for. Integrating with other systems across enterprise, working in the global scope, or anything that touches, that global data. Complex business logic. You don't want your citizen developers writing client scripts, business rules, fixed scripts, any custom user interfaces, and just any of the complex logic that goes into the platform. Keep that with your core teams, and make sure that you're just setting your citizen developers up for success by picking those kind of simple, fast time to value use cases. And we'll talk about recruiting the right citizen developers. So not everyone is fit to be a citizen developer. As you recruit across your organization, you want to make sure you're identifying the right candidates. And we've kind of bucketed two sort of skill sets, the aptitude and the attitude. And we'll drill into what this looks like. So we want to make sure that the candidates have moderate technical skills. They're familiar working with the back end of systems. They understand somewhat application development and just have that technical prowess about them. We also want them to understand the company, the process, and the existing applications that are in use. If they're not in a technical department, maybe they are just a technical mind within the line of business. Maybe they're creating personal apps, like Paige said, working out of Excel, or kind of figuring out ways to automate things on their own. Those are definitely some of the characteristics that we look for in terms of the skill set. We'll move to the attitude now, because as skilled as they may be, if they're not willing to collaborate with your IT team and play by the rules, it might not be a good fit. So we want to make sure that they're willing to cooperate and partner with your IT team. They understand that the value that automation can deliver, and when it's appropriate, and what, identifying those use cases in the previous slide. They've got an interest in app development. And like I said, they support the existing policies and standards. They're going to play by the rules, and they're not going to go try and break things and wreak havoc and cause technical debt across the platform. Okay, so governance. This was brought up as a key concern for most people, to no surprise to us. Every platform owner is concerned with mitigating risks in the development deployment process, supporting their developers, protecting the platform, protecting developers, all of that. And it's totally understandable. So with our App Engine product, we have baked in governance capabilities into the application process. So what we did is we defined an application lifecycle. Every application should have a lifecycle, from intake to retirement, and intake being idea, retirement being sunset. And so with App Engine, we have embedded this governance throughout the the application workflow, starting with an intake form that your citizen developers, set up a catalog item. They're requesting access to your low-code app development instance. Based on the credentials, certifications, skill, use case, your team would basically screen and vet and provision that access into App Engine Studio. They would build in a protected, scoped environment, where it's a little bit limited in terms of configuration and capabilities. There's not the scripting, but it's very powerful in terms of spinning up apps quickly for those simple processes. The validation phase, this is where your core team and that collaboration peer review comes in. So you can, we suggest peer review and collaboration. We also suggest ATF, our automated testing framework, and instance scan. Automation is a huge part of the governance piece, and our customers see a ton of value in that, because if you can automate the testing and the deployment from App Engine Studio, you're just increasing that time to production. And once they're in production, you've got to maintain it. So we have our App Engine Management Center. It's that little report dashboard screenshot in the middle. That gives our App Engine admins full visibility into all the apps in production, in the pipeline, intake requests, deployment requests. You can see basically everything regarding your custom apps and citizen development from this centralized dashboard. And then when it comes to retirement, App Engine Studio has the built-in workflows where as processes are no longer required or no longer necessary, they can be offboarded appropriately. So the governance is totally baked in, and it's a major value add for our App Engine. And all right, so for the foundational elements, we kind of talked about this earlier, but it really just comes down to adopting that low-code platform. We see, obviously, App Engine Studio on the Now platform, but we see customers with 2, 3, even more than that. You don't want too many before it gets overwhelming, but you have to buy in on the technology and make sure that the developers are in an environment that enables and empowers them, but also protects the rest of the platform. Like I said earlier, embrace the journey. It's a marathon, not a sprint. Market your wins along the way. And as your citizen development program grows, they become evangelizers themselves. And the office hours that Paige mentioned, your community will grow before you know it. And then the marketing success, I don't need to beat that horse again, but you just want to make sure that people know the value that it's bringing, how many apps are going live, and what the platform can do. And with that said, we're going to look at a real life use case. So Jabil is one of our customers that has had a ton of success piloting, scaling their citizen development program, and they actually use citizen development as a service, so their business functions can innovate as fast as they need to. And their citizen development program manager said that our ServiceNow citizen development program provides our community of citizen developers the framework to create their own new features and functionality. So what does this look like? They've saved more than 4,600 hours of work through automating processes as part of their citizen development program. They've increased the development capacity by 3 times. 90% of the code reviews pass in first attempt, going back to the automating of processes and kind of removing those bottlenecks and getting things to production. And they've onboarded 32 new citizen developers, which is non-IT developers across our organization. Obviously, it's not kind of a plug and play sort of thing. They had to put in some work to do that. And in order to achieve these results, they followed the 5 steps. They highlighted the outcomes that the business functions can realize. They established citizen developer commitments. They got buy-in from these developers to abide by the organizational policies and play by the rules. They also enabled the citizen developers. So you don't want to hold them back too much. You want to allow them to try new things and innovate on the platform without giving them too much freedom. And Jabil did a great job at building a community of practice. So making sure that the core team buys in, supports the citizen developers, and they're all working together towards one goal. And none of this would mean anything if there were no metrics to measure the value. So they defined some key metrics to measure success and really be able to track the value so that they could take it back to their leaders and say, hey, this is what we've done. This is a return on investment. This is why you should continue to invest more.
Yeah, and I coincidentally had Jabil as a customer when they first were onboarding to ServiceNow. And, lest you think that they were like light years ahead of every other customer when they started with ServiceNow, they were just like everybody else. They were trying to figure out the platform and how they were going to work on it and port their processes and over and everything. So, I feel like it's a great success story of, a company that started really from the ground up, and built a strong program around their ServiceNow platform. And I know Afton did a webinar a couple years ago, and she talked about how all their code reviews have to go through their change advisory board. And at first there was a lot of resistance against that, but as you see from the stats here, 90% are passing in the first attempt. So it shows that the value of doing that, and that people knowing that they have to do it, get things right the first time, 90% of the time. So thanks, Paige and Vance, for all that great information. We have one last poll here for you before we go to the Q&A. And I encourage you, if you have any questions, to go into the Q&A function and ask them there. And we will take those go through those. So our last poll is, like now that you've seen this presentation and gotten some information, how do you feel about citizen development now? Are you feeling more confident about it? You want to try to move forward with it, and or have you gotten any tips that have helped you, those of you who already had a program running? So we'll let this go for a little bit. It looks like we're pretty even here across questions 1 through 3. We are picking up a little bit on 4, but it looks like we're kind of distributed across all of the answers here. And it looks like the responses have slowed down here, so we'll go ahead and take the poll down. A few of the resources that we have referred to that we mentioned, we haven't put a whole lot of things in here because, as Paige said, a lot of it depends on what applications and products you'll be working with, as far as, for instance, what kind of training you want to go for and whatnot. So we're really just driving you to some other live on ServiceNow events like this one, where you can get more information, the Center of Excellence section, and a more in-depth view of the Jabil best practices profile. And then additionally, just informationally, we do have some other resources available to you. Our expert services team offers some service offerings around implementation design and services that you can engage them for. And if you happen to be an Impact customer, there is a Jumpstart Your App Engine Accelerator. So if you are going to use App Engine for your citizen development, you would potentially have this accelerator available to you to help you get started with that. And of course, don't miss out on any of our other webinars. We have a full schedule of webinars scheduled for this year. Our March webinar will be about how to set up your platform and be ready for upgrades. So you don't want to miss out on that one, as well as many other Live on ServiceNow webinars that we have. So thank you all very much for coming. I hope you found this to be helpful and useful with the information that was provided. Again, we will send out a copy of the presentation to all of you that attended, and the recorded version will be available on our YouTube channel for viewing later. So thank you again all for coming, and have a great rest of your day.